On in here, get your seats, get your seats. We're still masking indoors around these parts. It's the Wednesday edition of Status Coup News. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Welcome to the program on this Wednesday, October the 19th. Wow. Fall is just falling right on in here, isn't it, everybody? Well, we've got a wonderful show in store for you today. We're going to get into some really interesting stories that just need to be pursued, okay? Now, if I told you that there was potentially a serial killer in your town, and community leaders and local clergy and people went to the police and tried to raise alarm bells about that, and the police ignored those calls until a victim survived and was able to escape, you would probably wonder, what is the point of the police? Well, many residents in Kansas City, Missouri are asking themselves that exact same question after community fears about a potential serial killer were potentially realized when a survivor was able to escape and told police that there were potentially other dead folks in this alleged suspect's home. Well, later on in the program, we're going to be speaking with Ryan Sorrell, who is the founder and executive editor of the KC Defenders, one of the leading voices trying to bring attention, again, to the police about the potential of a predator in the community. And we're going to talk about not only the arrest, but the ways in which the mainstream media operates as a propaganda stenographer, public relations arm of American law enforcement, and the ways in which the police do not keep communities safe, especially from obvious threats. We're also going to touch a little bit on what's happening in these midterms. We're only just a few short weeks away from Election Day. I don't know how it's looking for Jim Crow Joe and them. I do not know what it's looking like for Jim Crow Joe and them. But we're going to look at a couple of races, one in Arizona, one in Northern Virginia, that I think are of note because you have these very shiny MAGA stars, who say very, very dumb things extremely loudly. And I wonder, how is it that these races are this close, that the Democrats are not able to put together enough of a compelling platform to get voters on their side? So we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But first, like I said, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Wednesday edition of Status Coup. Please be sure to become a member and subscribe. It is vital that you support independent media on the left because, the mainstream media is what, y'all? Some bullshit, of course. But we've got some great programming notes to offer you here at Status Coup. Join us tomorrow because immediately following the 5 p.m. broadcast is going to be the premiere of Tina's show, The Right Wing Insanity Report. In fact, we have a bit of a preview for you right here.
And and we've seen it not just in Portland, but everywhere where local law enforcement do turn their backs on the Trump supporters and fire, less lethals, not just tear gas, rubber bullets, whatnot, into BLM or anti-fascist protesters. I've seen that so many times.
The issue is that even today, following January 6th, you have law enforcement that doesn't know what to do when it finds out it has a Proud Boy within its
That's
ranks.
Right.
Last week in Chicago, they just announced that a Proud Boy officer won't be penalized because
Right.
It's not illegal to be a Proud Boy. When again, this is an issue of discrimination. Functionally, in the street, a Proud Boy cop is no different than a Nazi cop because they still believe that political violence against the left is in their rule set. They have white supremacist tenets, and so what is that? How is a black person going to see justice when a Proud Boy cop is on the other end of a gun? I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Ooh, that sounds spicy. I would like to actually tune in and listen to that. Listen, that is premiering tomorrow after the 5 p.m. broadcast, The Right Wing Insanity Report, hosted by Tina. So please come back and check that out. That sounds like a very compelling conversation. Can I add my 2 cents? The police have always been the Klan. That's it. That's the tweet. Send tweet. Hey guys, thank you all for coming on in here. Give us a thumbs up on the video. Feed this wayward YouTube algorithm that demands engagement so others can be made aware of the channel and of the content and the programming. So let's go ahead and start at the midterm elections. We are only 3 weeks away. I don't know. Like I said, it's not looking too good. It's not looking too good for Joey and them. It's a possibility, though, that the issue surrounding abortion access could be the one that could drive the Democrats over the top. I have a feeling that there are a lot of Republican and conservative women who are going to very sneakily vote for the Democratic opponent because they know good and goddamn well that abortion care is health care. It's reproductive justice. And whether or not they say it outwardly, they utilize those services. And that is just the facts. But I want us to begin in Arizona. Obviously, there's a very close Senate race happening there in Arizona. Obviously, a lot of the national attention has been focused on the gubernatorial race there in Arizona because it's a tight one. It's going to be a squeaker. I want us to hear a clip from the GOP candidate for governor. Her name is Kari Lake. And Kari Lake, she reminds me of a much more articulate and shiny and polished Sarah Palin. She could be scary. I can see why Democrats are quite concerned that she could not only be victorious in this gubernatorial race, but obviously some of her policies are very, very out there, and some of her ideas. She is a 2020 election denier. She also, I believe, supports Arizona's secession for the union. And I say, see you later. See you bye. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. And she is determined to squelch abortion rights for women living in Arizona. And we know that abortion restrictions disproportionately impact poor and lower income women. Obviously, Black and brown women are far more disproportionately affected. So she's for a lot of bad things. Yes. And because of that, she feels very comfortable and enabled to say very wild shit. and she had an opportunity to do exactly that at a recent rally where, listen to the list of folks that she said, people who are no longer with us, who have transitioned and departed, but this interesting list of people that she claimed would be America First Republicans, were they still alive?
I'm a true believer that if MLK, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, if JFK were alive today, if our founding fathers were alive today, they would be America First Republicans. I really believe that.
Well, a lot of people believe in things there, Kari. Children believe in the fairy tale, in Santa Claus, and in the Tooth Fairy, and all kinds of fantastical things. And she's not 100% wrong when she talks about the founding fathers and even JFK being America First Republicans, and the ways in which the Republican Party presents itself and its platform and its ideas in 2022. I don't think it's so far off where the genocidal slave owning founding fathers were back in the 1700s. And JFK, as we know, his family made their fortune off of illegal dealings, prohibition and bootlegging, etc., and supporting the Nazis' rise to power in advance of World War II. So, I can see her points on a couple of those folks. But when it comes to Martin Luther King Jr., and this is something that conservatives and liberals, more often white conservatives and liberals, love misquoting the hell out of this man. And Martin Luther King can't get no rest. He can't get no rest because people keep misquoting him and taking all of his stuff out of context. And it's willful at this point. And this is why the accurate teaching of American history is so vitally important, because people will be whole ass radicals out here, and then they will get reduced to a McDonald's I Have a Dream commercial during Black History Month. It's really disgusting. But I want, in case you folks or anyone watching, or maybe this clip will make the right ring rounds, and maybe they'll learn something. But I want us to play a quick montage of Dr. King and some of his very leftist positions, right? Dr. King, because he was a pastor, does not make him conservative. It's impossible to advocate for Black liberation and be conservative about this shit. That is a radical concept in colonialist America, right? Like, Black people being free, what are you talking about? It hasn't even been 100 years since Black people got the legal right to fully vote, to participate as citizens. But even we see from the fuckery that is happening across the country in voting restriction rights, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, name it. It's still very difficult for Black people to assert their own constitutional rights. And Martin Luther King was very clear about that. And he spoke very forcefully clearly and decisively about the need for a radical revolution in this country to redistribute political and economic wealth and power. Let me say that word again, redistribute, not march for 1,000 years, not vote for 1,000 years, fucking distribute the wealth and political power in this country away from those who have it over concentrated in their hands to those that actually have none. So I want us to take a quick look at this compilation of some of Martin Luther King's greatest leftist socialist hits.
We must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. We read one day, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Estimated that we spend $322,000 for each enemy we kill in Vietnam, while we spend in the so-called war on poverty in America only about $53 for each person classified as poor. The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. The other thing I want you to understand is this, that it didn't cost the nation 1 penny to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation 1 penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power.
So let's be clear here, okay? For liberals and conservatives alike, if you're going to quote Dr. King, quote him accurately. When he says we're going to have to spend billions of dollars in order to redistribute the wealth of this country, what do you think Kari Lake hears? What do you think she hears? Do you think she heard, oh, we have to rein in government spending? Nope, that's not what she heard at all. And it's so interesting because people do go to great lengths to misrepresent King's legacy and his positions or policies. And just as a little caveat before I move on, every time you heard him in those clips say Vietnam, I want you to insert Ukraine. I want you to insert Iraq. I want you to insert Afghanistan, because the same imperialist capitalist bullshit that America has been doing since the days of Dr. King, they continue to do, and they continue to be upheld by both parties. So it's so wild to me that Democrats, who are also big militaristic advocates for, global imperialism, in addition to big supporters of law enforcement here domestically, this is where I struggle to see the differences between the parties and the candidates. Colin, let's pop up the poll piece from KJZZ.com. Let me just give you guys an idea about how Kari Lake is faring in this race, talking insanity. And the clip that we just saw is just the tip of the iceberg of her ridiculousness. So, to quote from this article from KJZZ, a new poll from the Arizona Family and Higher Ground shows that Democratic candidate for governor Katie Hobbs has just a 1-point lead over Republican Kari Lake. About 46% of voters said that they would support Hobbs, and about 45% plan to vote for Lake. Now, guys, we all know statistically how polls work, and that is well within the margin of error. According to one pollster here, they say, quote, it's basically a dead heat in the governor's race. The race is definitely narrowing at this point, according to Paul Bentz, who is the senior vice president for Bentz I'm sorry, I keep losing my place, who is a senior vice president at a polling outlet there in Arizona. They do research and strategy with Higher Ground. How is it that Katie Hobbs, by the way, and I watched some of Katie Hobbs' clips, because again, the issue of policing is very important to me, because the amount of money that America spends on policing could be the amount that could make the difference in actually solving the poverty crisis that we have in this country. When we talk about crime and the rise in violent crime, if you think that the kids are out here carjacking for shits and giggles, and some of them might be carjacking for shits and giggles, by the way, but they're hungry. You understand? People commit crimes, they rob, they steal, they carjack in order to feed themselves, in order to feed their families. Now, it's not a justification, but it is certainly an explanation. And the amount of money that gets spent on law enforcement, policing, incarceration is absolutely enough money to resolve the poverty crisis, which in turn would resolve the crime crisis. And looking at Katie Hobbs' positions on border policing, I found a little concerning because she sounded very much like her right-wing opponent. She is in favor of more border security, which ergo means more policing, ergo means potentially more violence against those that are legally trying to seek asylum. Don't forget, y'all, you used to be able to walk over here first and then make your asylum claim. But all that got muddled up betwixt Obama, Trump, and Biden. It's a mess now down at the southern border. So when the solutions to problems from candidates seeking public office, when they all say we need to spend more money on police, my heckles go up. Okay, my red flags are flapping in the wind when I see stuff like that. So that's the Arizona governor's race. It bears watching. Also very close, that Senate race in Arizona. It is going to be very interesting whether or not the Democrats are going to be able to at least maintain the 50 seats there in the Senate. But I see a lot of the same. I see a lot of inaction. I see a lot of obstinance coming from the Senate. I mean, that is where bills go to die, is it not? In the American Senate, they do absolutely nothing. Whether or not Democrats are able to maintain control of the House will be very interesting. And this next race that I want us to take a look at is actually a very competitive one coming out of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia's 7th congressional district, currently occupied by Democrat Abigail Spanberger. I can't speak on how good a congressperson Abby is, but because Abby is former CIA, I'm disinclined to believe Abby, right? And in her campaign ads, that is amongst the first things that she lists as her priorities is to increase funding for law enforcement. I said, does no one else have any other ideas? is that the only idea on the whiteboard? Can somebody write something else up there, please, for ways in which our US dollars can be redistributed away from the police and the carceral system? Please, let's do something different. Let's try something else for once. But anyway, I digress. So Abigail Spanberger is in a very tough race against Republican, I'm gonna call her a little junior MAGA. her name is Yesli Vega. Yesli Vega is she served, and for one, she's police herself. She's police, so you know. So it's two polices basically going against each other in Virginia's 7th congressional district. So I want everybody to lose. But anyway. Yesli Vega is mounting a formidable campaign challenge against Abigail Spanberger. Yesli Vega was a campaign associate of Governor Glenn Youngkin. Governor Youngkin, as you know, just recently captured that office by running a campaign targeting Virginia parents about the issues of COVID school closures, about transgender identities, and the ways that Virginia public schools will recognize or fail to recognize students that identify as transgender. And critical race theory was a big issue for Governor Youngkin. So Yesli Vega, the daughter of El Salvadorian immigrants, is rolling with him. Okay, so wild times. But as part of Yesli Vega's spiel, she has been complaining bitterly about the runaway spending out of Washington, out of the Biden, Pelosi, Spanberger administration. And I want to take a look at one of her campaign ads featuring her father. If she wasn't talking nonsense, it would actually be a very cute commercial. But because she is the police and is running like the police and supports MAGA folks like Glenn Youngkin, no, that's not cute at all, actually. But let's take a look at her campaign ad talking about how repulsed she is at the runaway spending in Washington.
This is my dad, and he raised us to budget our money.
Ahorra más de lo que gastas.
But today, Biden, Pelosi, and Spanberger's reckless spending is driving up inflation, hurting Virginia families.
Hoy el sueño americano cuesta más.
But I have a plan to cut spending. On the Board of Supervisors, I fought to eliminate wasteful spending and cut taxes. In Congress, I'll do the same. Mi nombre es Yesli Vega y yo apruebo este mensaje.
Me too.
Oh, isn't that adorable? I love that. Except, Yesli Vega is full of shit. And here's how I know she's full of shit. Let's go to that Prince William County clip there. Not a clip, but an article. A story came out here about Yesli Vega's and her own personal finances. And it turns out that Yesli Vega actually filed for personal bankruptcy. Now, on the surface, that may not even be a disqualifying thing, because a lot of people have financial problems here under capitalism, right? It's hard to survive and stay in the black financially under capitalism. But this is the headline. So before Vega decried reckless spending, also, by the way, she was very much against the student loan forgiveness program recently rolled out by Joe Biden. So before Yesli Vega decried reckless spending, she had $96,000 in student loans, debts, and cleared and claimed personal bankruptcy, right? She had all of this cleared in her personal bankruptcy, including over $40,000 in student loans. What's that? What's that? Oh, Yesli Vega could potentially have benefited from policies that she has spoken out against. Isn't that funny how that works? And just to be clear, y'all, and the only reason I'm pointing this out is because, again, this is a close congressional race. Virginia has been a purpling state over the past several election cycles. With the election of Glenn Youngkin as governor recently, VA could very easily swerve on back to the far right. It's quite possible. And if Yesli Vega is allowed into Congress, she will help to facilitate that sort of agenda. She has also been very loud and wrong, shall we say, about the issue of abortion rights. She is against abortions in all forms. She even doubts, there's one very effective campaign aide running against her that quotes her directly. It's a recording of her saying that she doesn't necessarily believe that a pregnancy can be successfully, put together under the circumstances of a rape. And I'm paraphrasing here, she says, if it's forced, if it's not organic, it's hard for a woman to become pregnant via rape. I mean, this is the kind of person that's running here. So the contradictions and glaring hypocrisy of Deputy Vega not being able to, number one, manage her own finances, right? Because I have empathy, because I know what it's like to be poor and struggling in America, especially under the weight of crushing student loan debt. I get that. So I have empathy for her. But the problem is, if this was reversed and it was her opponent that was able to file for bankruptcy and have these tens of thousands of dollars of personal debts and student loan debts cleared, she would be screaming bloody murder about personal responsibility and why should I have to pay as a taxpayer for your mistakes and you can't manage. And the thing is, y'all, we have to understand that it is almost impossible. It is, I just say almost as a caveat, but it is very difficult to try to reason and argue with people who refuse to either use logic, use facts, or who have every intention of distorting very stated and obvious plain facts in order to win their argument, right? So in the same way, Yesli Vega is going to hand wave away her bankruptcy in the same breath that she decries the student loan debt forgiveness that Joe Biden is offering. By the way, paltry, means tested and needs an application, it's a shit piece of student loan debt relief. But I guess if we're starving, crumbs are something. Yes, but I got back. So for her to complain about that while struggling with student loan debt herself is the very same way that Herschel Walker utilized that abortion clinic when it suited him, and then is going to speak out against abortion access for everybody else. These people are hypocrites, okay? They care not about their contradictions. They're not principled people, but they will try to beat liberals and Democrats over the head with that morality stick, and they don't have a moral high ground. So why is it that these Democratic candidates are having such a hard time beating shit out of these dummies, right? It's because the Democrats are feckless. They're weak. They are still longing for that quote unquote moderate voter that they believe has gone either Trump or is easily swayed by conservative and Republican rhetoric. The Democrats insist on always moving to the right of the GOP on a lot of issues, with the exception of abortion, right? When it comes to the issues, again, of police funding and addressing crime, the 1994 crime bill was a conservative wet dream that Republicans could only fantasize about. And Joe Biden in the Senate delivered it right to him. The Hawley Amendment that was added to the policing bill, whatever, that would have will probably add the funding to allow for 100,000 more police officers, 100,000 more police officers to be deployed on the streets of America. That's some the Hawley and my man, not my man, Dick Durbin. They came up with that together, bipartisan in the Senate. So if the Democrats insist on trying to run to the right of Republicans, good luck with that. Good luck with that, because I assure you, a not insignificant portion of the voters that you would have gotten potentially to vote for Democrats that probably themselves are no longer Democrats, they're registered independents because they are fed up with the two-party duopoly, yes, but they want to participate because in America, one person, one vote, and it's incumbent upon us to perhaps participate in the system still, despite the fact that it keeps disappointing us. But the Democrats can't seem to put together a good enough progressive platform without being derailed by Republicans by calls of socialism and communism. And for the example of abortion, for Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, to propose his 15-week ban on abortion federally, not the first time he's done that, but the latest time that he's done it, and for him to use the rhetoric of, we want to get to where France and the rest of Europe is with abortion restrictions and those limits on abortion, but failing always, strategically omitting the fact that they have universal health care. They have paid family leave. They have someone coming to your house to assist you with your child and some of the household errands that new parents find themselves very overwhelmed by. Their social safety net exists, whereas it does not exist here in the United States. And the Democrats are going to understand that they're going to keep losing to Republicans until they actually present these ideas in a comprehensive yet easily digestible way. But the problem is, and I hope people are really paying attention here, is that the Democrats really don't want a progressive state. I don't know what else they have to do to prove this to us. They are not interested in a progressive state. Joe Biden is the best Republican president since Reagan. Okay? Like, Joe Biden is Reagan-esque out here. And that is the status quo with a little bit of policy crummy giveaways to the base, a la the marijuana pardons only for those convicted federally, $10,000 student loan debt only if you means test and actually fill out the application. Come on, man. I'm exhausted by all of this. Let's take a quick little break, a timeout for a second. Please come on in here. Give us a thumbs up on the video. Give us a like. Give us a subscription. That would be awesome. Please don't forget to come tune in to Status Coup News tomorrow after the 5 p.m. broadcast. Just stick around, hang out in the chat, and you will automatically be directed to the premiere of the Right Wing Insanity Report hosted by Tina. So we don't want to miss that. All righty. do we have Ryan present? So guys, all right, I want us to get to the next story because we have and let me get this set up for everybody before we get into a piece. Ryan, what's going on? Thank you so much for being here. You look like my cousin, by the way, Ryan, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But so as I told you at the top of the show, just imagine that there is potentially a predator in your community. Women are going missing left and right. Some have actually been found murdered. And you try to go to the police, and the police look at you silly. The first thing I want us to do, can we pop up that order from the Missouri governor, please, Colin? Because I want to put some of this into context before we get into the nuts and bolts of the story. And I'm going to try to make this quick. So over the summer in June, it was that Governor Parson of Missouri signed into law SB 678, Senate Bill 678. And this bill specifically addresses funding for the Kansas City Police Department. And what it does legally, now it is codified into Missouri law, okay, that 25% of the city's general revenue per fiscal year is going to be spent on policing. Did you hear that, everybody? On a city of roughly 450,000 people, a quarter of their budget will be spent exclusively on policing. So keep that in mind. So the Kansas City Police Department's operating budget, and when we get our guest on, they could correct me if I have this mistaken, but it's approximately $270 million a year. $270 million a year for a city of 450,000, okay? So let's put this in context, okay? Weeks ago, a couple of months ago, community leaders, clergy, residents, everyday people that live in this area have been complaining to the police about missing and murdered women and wondering if the police were going to do anything about it. I want us to take a quick look at a short clip posted on TikTok and reposted by the Kansas City Defender on their YouTube page of Bishop Tony Caldwell. I believe this was back in September, making the plea about these missing women in Kansas City.
Actually, don't think I have that clip.
Okay, don't worry about it, Colin. It's okay. It's okay. So anyway, but as I mentioned, community members have been making this call about these missing and murdered Black women. And on October 7th, 10 days ago, the morning of, in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, which is a small suburb just literally right outside of Kansas City, neighbors were awakened by a 22-year-old woman pleading for help. She was dressed in what appeared to be a bondage outfit of Black latex. She had ligature marks around her wrist. She had a dog collar around her neck, and she was terrified. She told the neighbors that she had been kidnapped a month prior. She had been repeatedly sexually assaulted, and she made the claims to police that two of her friends didn't make it. Okay. And since then, police have arrested Timothy Haslett, 39 years old, of Excelsior Springs, and charged him with, among other things, kidnapping and rape. And I'm joined today. I want to bring in our guest. We are joined with the founder and executive editor of the Kansas City Defender, which is an independent digital Black media outlet, Ryan Sorrell, who has been integral and on the forefront amongst other voices there in Kansas City to try to bring attention to the community's concerns about a potential serial killer stalking Black women there. And Ryan, I appreciate you making some time to join me today. Thank you so much for being on Status Coup.
Absolutely. I appreciate you inviting me on.
So Ryan, and initially how I came to your reporting was through the Jezebel piece, right? And I want to give Jezebel some credit here because they attribute the Kansas City Defender reporting extensively throughout the piece. And I know sometimes in bigger mainstream outlets will outright steal the work of smaller outlets. So I appreciate Jezebel giving us proper attribution and credit to the work that you and your staff have done there in Kansas City. So talk to me about the weeks leading up to October 7th, before the young woman was able to escape her captor. What have you and other voices in Kansas City been trying to raise the alarm about these missing and murdered women? And about approximately about how many missing and murdered women are we talking about?
Absolutely. And to answer your first question, we unfortunately don't know, because oftentimes the women who are preyed upon are those who are most vulnerable. Oftentimes they don't have families who can formally file missing persons reports to the police department. And so really we don't know how many young women are missing, and that's part of the problem. But just to kind of go back to the initial question of what was taking place in the weeks leading up to this horrific revelation, I think it requires some context and of how the Kansas City Police Department operates, some context of how the Kansas City Police Department views us as a Black news organization, how they view the Black community. And quite frankly, number one, the Kansas City Police Department is currently under federal investigation for racism and discrimination. They have a long and documented history of brutalizing and quite frankly, inflicting racial terror on our communities. And so that's the type of relationship that the Kansas City Police Department has with Black people in our city. And so when we first started raising the alarm of missing and potentially murdered Black women, specifically from a street here in Kansas City called Prospect Avenue, those reports first started coming to us, I would say at around maybe September 23rd, September 22nd, possibly mid-September, just speaking generally. And we spoke to a man named Bishop Caldwell. We also spoke to a number of other community members who were saying that Black women were going missing from this particular street called Prospect Avenue. So we republished, we reposted that video, the one that you mentioned earlier. And we also provided a disclaimer saying, just because we were still doing additional investigation, but given the severity of this issue and given the fact we also don't find the police department to be the arbiters of truth, we don't think the police department really have the best interests of the Black community in mind. So we don't feel like we can go to them in these types of scenarios. And so we said, this is information we have been receiving from a number of people in the community, that people are potentially missing from this particular area, that women are potentially being killed. And as soon as we get additional information, we will update you all. So we're very transparent in our processes and our reporting. And I'll go ahead. Were you going to ask a question?
Oh, no. Continue, honey. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. And so that was what our initial reports were. And of course, directly, 3 days, we reported that on a Friday, and it kind of blew up over the weekend. And by that upcoming Monday, the police department issued a statement saying unequivocally that what we reported on and what community members had been, issuing the testimonials and reports that people in the community were giving, that people were missing. The police department issued a statement that called these rumors, first off. And secondly, they said they were completely unfounded rumors. And they issued this statement without reaching out to us to figure out, where did we get this information from? They did not reach out to anyone in the community to figure out why were people in the community saying this? They essentially, in essence, what they wanted to do was to discredit us as a Black news outlet. And they also in essence, were silencing Black people in the community and Black women specifically in the community who were issuing these claims and reports and testimonials. And so that was incredibly problematic and disturbing to us. And secondarily, what took place after the police department issued that statement was all of the white media outlets in our city piled on. And they, oftentimes I consider it to be standard white journalistic practice to unquestioningly parrot what the police department says. And so that's exactly what they did. They did not, the white news outlets in our city did not do any investigation whatsoever, looking into what the police department said to verify it, if it was true or not. They printed it, and essentially everybody was trying to discredit us as a news outlet, and everybody was also once again silencing what people in our community were saying. And of course, now we find out, very unfortunately, in this horrific tragedy, a month later, that this young Black woman, 22-year-old Black woman, was picked up off of this exact same street that we said people were going missing from, at the exact same time period that we said that people were going missing. And she also said that 2 of her friends did not make it out and had also been murdered by this exact same man, Timothy Hazlitt Jr. And the police department, I actually reached out to the police department before we published our latest, reporting on this piece and making that connection. And the police department said they maintain, I asked them specifically, I said, given the fact this woman is from the exact area we said at the exact same time, do you all maintain that what we reported initially was completely unfounded? Because, and I even said, I could understand if you said you don't have any evidence to support these claims, or if you said something like, we don't have any missing persons reports to support these claims, but we're willing to look into it. I can understand that. But to say that they're completely unfounded without doing any type of investigation whatsoever, that's what we found to be disturbing and anti-Black. We find that to be part of the legacy of white supremacist policing in our city that does not care about Black lives. And so that was the largest problem that we saw. And now I think a lot of people in our city are outraged, not only with the police department, but also with how the media was complicit. The white media outlets were complicit in the silencing of Black people in our community. And now, this is where we are at. And because of the fact that they did not listen, a month ago, this young woman was being tortured in a basement for a month. She actually told her neighbors once she escaped, she told them that she thought she was down there for 2 years, because that's the type of psychological trauma that she endured. And now we also don't know, is there a potential, if people were to take action on this at the time that we first raised these alarms, there's a potential that those other 2 women that this young lady said had been killed, there's a potential that they could have been rescued. But now, of course, that's not a possibility. So it's just overall, the entire situation is just absolutely horrific and tragic and terrible.
I want us to focus. I will ask you about the additional reporting that you found out about this alleged kidnapper and raper. I have to say alleged because we journalists here, you know what I'm saying, Timothy Haslett. But this man who has been charged with these crimes in connection to violating this 22-year-old woman. But I want us to talk about and continue about the mainstream media coverage and the ways in which you accurately state that mainstream media outlets operate as propaganda outlets. They are there to do the police say journalism, officials say, authorities say, without asking or trying to gain information from other sources. They rely exclusively about what the police say. And if you could pop up that Kansas City Star piece for me there, Colin, because this piece is very emblematic of that. But what the interesting part about this piece posted by the Kansas City Star, and the headline there reads, it says, Excelsior Springs kidnapping case not linked to Kansas City missing persons cases, police say. And there's a video here, and I didn't pull the video because the video is only 45 seconds long, but the video cuts out at a very interesting point. So it's interviewing, obviously, a police spokesperson, giving the media updates about the latest status of the investigation, which, by the way, police seeming to be not releasing a lot of details. But right when the clip cuts off at about 45 seconds, the cop is in the middle of saying that there was a cadaver dog brought out to the home, but at this time, we can't say what the findings were. And I find that a really interesting, weird way to say that, because I feel as though in order to discredit the story that you have reported upon and other members in the community have been trying to raise the alarms to police about, had there not been any cadaver material, I think they would have said that. I think they would have just come out and said we didn't find any cadaver material. But the fact that they're not saying yes or no leads me to believe that it's yes. So the ways in which the media has just been willing to just go along with the cop narrative, something that you touched upon here. But how does this play out to the ways in which the Kansas City police interact and engage with the Black community there in Kansas City generally? And by the way, Kansas City has a very significant Black population, so it's lots of Black folks there. How are Black people in the community generally treated, in addition to this apathy and indifference shown in the case of these missing and murdered women?
I love that question, because that's the reason that I got into journalism, is because of how angry I was with how our local media outlets would just unquestioningly every single time. And there's so many situations, I'll name off a few in a bit, but so many situations where the police department has been caught flat out lying, and our local media outlets just printed it and, never apologized for it. And, they made their little updates, but they have certainly not repaired the harm that they have caused by spreading these state sanctioned lies. And so, to me, that's just the number one problem here, is that even in that article that you just showed, really that's misdirection, because they're saying missing persons not connected to the case in Excelsior Springs. The woman who was found in Excelsior Springs who escaped was not in the missing persons database from Kansas City. And so we as a community said that people were missing, and we raised the alarm, and rather than looking into it or investigating it or doing any type of due diligence whatsoever, the police department simply said, well, that's not in our database, so we basically don't care. That's essentially what their response was. And so even now, after we have evidence that even though someone was not in their database, they still were missing, the police department is not willing to, rethink their practice. And so this news article that the Kansas City Star just published saying that it's not connected because it's not the missing person database, that's literally just a misdirection piece to try to bring, all this attention away from the Kansas City Police Department to try to give them back some type of credibility. I don't think that's going to happen by any means. Secondly, to give some background to the question that you asked around what is the relationship like for the Kansas City Police Department and the media, the Black community here. One example that I give every single time I talk, just because I think it is so symbolic of how the local media outlets are complicit in the brutalization, dehumanization, and actual murder of Black people in our city by the police department. One example I give is in March of last year, a man named Malcolm Johnson was killed. He was murdered by the Kansas City Police Department in a gas station here in Kansas City. And as soon as that happened, the Kansas City Police Department issued an official report that said that he was armed. It said that he was engaged in a shootout with the police department. And so in essence, what that did was that would justify the fact that they killed him, of course. And without questioning that narrative, without being skeptical in any way whatsoever, all of the local news outlets in our city, once again, unquestioningly parroted exactly what the police said in their official police report. And they said, armed man engaged in a shootout with the police department dies. And so, of course, anybody who reads that type of article is like, well, he deserved it. And they go on about their day. And come to find out, a month after that took place, some employees at that gas station actually leaked surveillance footage from the incident that took place. And we find out not only was he unarmed, but that he was actually being held on the ground by 3 police officers. And one of the police officers accidentally shot another police officer and then murdered Malcolm. And of course, we would have never known this information if those employees of that gas station did not leak it. This is only one example of many. There are so many documented examples, even just last year, in the case of a police officer named Eric Denier, who murdered a Black man here named Cameron Lamb. It was proven in the courtroom. The attorney for that case was Lee Merritt, who also represented Ahmaud Arbery. It was proven in the courtroom that the Kansas City Police Department planted a weapon on the crime scene in order to try to make it look like Cameron Lamb was armed. And the court literally said that. And in that case, our chief of police said that he believes every single police officer would handle that situation exactly how that officer did. And so that will give you some context, hopefully, to how anti-Black, how racist, how discriminatory, how violent, how problematic our police department in our city is.
Ryan, we have about 2 minutes left. I know the KC Defender has done some additional reporting about the man now arrested and charged with the kidnapping and rape of the 22-year-old woman who was able to break free quickly. Could you give us the latest about what you all found on his social media postings and basically his political ideology? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, the short of it is that he's a white supremacist. He said things like we're in a race war. He said some violent things about Breonna Taylor and that she deserved to die. He also said things like, when Black people start to act like equals, then I'll treat them as such. So very clearly, a white supremacist, someone who is very motivated by white supremacist ideologies. And it's clear that that is also what motivated him to do the things that he did. So very, very horrific again.
Well, listen, Ryan, the Kansas City Defender is the credible source on this story. Kansas City media outlets, newspapers, television stations have rendered themselves not credible because they will repeat the police version of things, chapter and verse. So we appreciate you being an independent voice and standing up for the voiceless, the people, the Black people, specifically in Kansas City, Missouri, and the Black women there who have been targeted by what appears to be a serial predator. I can't rely on anything that the Kansas City police say. So at least I know that with confidence that there is at least the KC Defender out there that is willing to push the police, ask the very difficult questions that other media outlets are obviously very afraid to ask for whatever reason. So I appreciate you guys bringing very honest and very clear and community focused journalism in the interest of public safety out here for women in your community. So I thank you very much for your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that greatly. And I would just want to say that one of the only, things that I am optimistic about is that we are organizing on the ground now to create our own database of missing persons and to be able to create our own public safety infrastructure so that we don't have to rely on the police department, because it's very clear that they have no capability whatsoever of being able to provide safety for us. So we are going to start doing that for ourselves.
Follow the Kansas City Defender, KC Defender, on social media. We've been joined today with the founder and executive editor, Ryan Sorrell. Ryan, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
Hey, gang, that is today's show for Status Coup News. Please go follow me places around the internet. Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube at BIDWKB, social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, yaggity, yaggity, yaggity. On behalf of Jordan and Colin, please enjoy the rest of your day. Tune in back here to Status Coup News tomorrow. Obviously, the premiere of the Right Wing Insanity Report tomorrow night. See you guys later. Bye.